Hi, I'm Paul Germain, and welcome to another session of Smart Boating. You know, interestingly, this is the 200th show that we produced since 2006, and along the way we've covered a variety of topics. We've covered everything from hurricane protection to docking, and today is going to be another really interesting show. It's going to be on how to sell your boat, and joining us is a very experienced local captain, Edward Cushing. Welcome, Edward.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for having me on your show.
It's great to have you on the show. You know, it's going to be a really interesting one. This is a topic a lot of people are interested in. And but before we get into it, can you share a little bit about your boating background and maybe any experience you had buying and selling boats?
Well, buying and selling is, I won't say it's been my middle name, but I've had a few experiences.
Okay.
Mostly positive.
Yeah.
But I've been around boats most of my adult and even before life.
Yeah.
And just love being out on the water and under any circumstance.
Yeah, yeah. So you've been boating since you've been a kid, and it
Right.
sounds like you've had a lot of boats along the way and
Right,
picked up a few tips about buying and selling boats, right?
Exactly. It's been great.
All right. Well, you've got just the right experience, so why don't we get into the show?
Sure.
Okay. Well, Edward, you know, this topic of how to sell your boat is an important one and a very large one. And we can't really do justice to all the aspects of it in a half-hour show, but I think we can get the important points down. And one thing a viewer might have, a question they might have watching the show is, why should I bother watching the show? This seems like a simple point, a simple decision. What would be your thought on that?
Well, the decision to sell is certainly simple, but the preparation prior to selling is what is most obvious to everyone that needs the most work. The boat needs a lot of attention.
Right, so a lot of people, they actually spend a lot more time getting ready to buy a boat than to sell a boat, right? So
Absolutely.
If they watch this show, really they're gonna pick up some pointers, like you just mentioned, about how to sell the boat, which is gonna give them a faster sale, and it's gonna get them more money, right?
Right.
Okay, now when they think about that, they say, okay, well, first step is assessing the condition of the boat.
Right.
Now there's two avenues, right? The first one's a professional marine surveyor, and the other one's do it yourself, right?
Exactly.
So what do you see as the pros and cons there?
Well, the professional is going to give you the most, well, I guess I would say the hardest opinion,
Okay.
because their job is to point out the defects.
Yes.
Whereas someone else might simply just point out the obvious. So it's really a question of the price point of the boat, and size, price point, and the complexity of what you have to repair.
Right. How much detail you have to go into it.
Right.
Personally, I think that if someone doesn't want to hire a marine surveyor, which I think is a good idea typically, and wants a higher level than their own opinion, do it yourself, then they might touch base with a local dealer mechanic at the local marine yard or marina, and ask them to look it over quickly, the engine and some of the systems, and get an educated opinion from them, right?
Right. That would be my suggestion.
Yeah, that's a good way to go.
Right.
Yep. Edward, once you've assessed the condition of the boat, the next thing to do is preparing it for sale. And there's a lot of different components to that, and we're kneeling on the dock next to the boat. One of the most important things is to get the boat shiny and clean, and a big aspect of that is, of course, the hull. So I would guess just washing and waxing and maybe even going to a compound would be a good idea in this area. What do you think?
Well, in this particular case, yes. You definitely, everyone gets used to what their boat looks like, but from a presentation and a selling standpoint, you want it to look fresh and as clean and shiny as possible.
Yes.
Everyone loves a clean boat.
Right, right.
And really waxing, bright work, chrome, all of those things need to be tackled.
Yeah, so I think about tackling the hull first with the wash, the wax, the compound if you need it. Maybe you get a professional involved to detail that part of the
Right.
boat if you need it. Another thing is, on an older boat, you can even go and paint it. Like a lot of flag blue hulls suffer from fading. So you may be able to compound it out, or you may have to use a paint, right?
Right.
Yep. Yeah. Okay.
Definitely. Paint is really a key element. The dark colors tend to fade to this chalky white.
Yes.
And that really just is a signal to the buyer that, oh, you're going to have to do a paint job.
Right, right,
It
right.
really is it's a real red flag.
Better to take it off the table.
Right.
So you dress the hull, and then we've got the bottom, and you know, the boat can look a lot fresher if you're able to put on a new coat of bottom paint, and maybe
Right.
touch up where the skeg is if you get an outboard or inboard outboard, right?
Right. Well,
Yep.
the thing that when you're looking at a boat, if it's out of the water, obviously the bottom is right there for you to examine.
Yes.
And that's the good news. The bad news, the bottom is there to examine.
Right. So you want to freshen it up.
Right.
Right, right. And you know, the other thing that you're holding on to the stainless here, and almost all boats have stainless or chrome or aluminum, and that to me is another item that you want to address, because oftentimes here at the bottom of the stanchions you can get rust and you can get bleeding, so that's a good area to focus on as well when you're refreshing the boat, right?
Yes, well, regarding stanchions, you don't want to see rust stains drooling down the side of the boat. That's
Right.
just as a real red flag.
Yes, it won't look good at all.
It won't look good at all, right?
No. Edward, you know, when people are prepping the boat, getting ready for a fast sail at good money, the upholstery is not something they should overlook, right?
Right. It's really a key element of the pleasing to the touch and the look.
Mm-hmm.
You want something that basically doesn't look like a beater, and it needs to be fresh.
Yeah, so what I see is a lot of times boats have white interiors, and then they're out in the sun all the time, so they kind of get scuffed up. People sit on with the suits, which bleach through, so you get this reddish tint to a white seat. So you want to get rid of all that, right?
Exactly.
Yep. And sometimes you can they have different cleaners that you can get, and you just spray them on and you just wipe them off like that. But it's pretty easy to do, but it makes a whole world of difference in terms of the sales potential of your boat, right?
It does. Again, it's the first impression is what you're selling here.
Yes, yes, and it's a big one. Now, this is a 24-foot cuddy cabin that we're on, so it's difficult to show inside, but in terms of a mental picture, there's a two-person bunk up front with cushions, again, more upholstery, and there's a head in between. So again, people want to pay attention to that upholstery, and if they have a carpet or something, they want to shampoo that and get it clean and get it out to dry, right?
If you can clean it. Otherwise, if the carpet is not fixed, you can just maybe remove it and show the nice fiberglass decking.
That's a good idea, yeah. Make it look clean, so to take care of the upholstery.
Get rid of the tired stuff.
Get rid of the tired.
Don't leave everything in that you might otherwise discard.
Clean it up. How about the head and the shower? Those are areas that you want to pay particular attention to,
Yeah,
right?
those require a good stiff brush and a good cleaner.
Yeah. So really do your job and clean thoroughly in that area.
Yeah, bring the fire hose.
Bring the fire hose. Well, Edward, there's a lot of pieces on a boat to consider when you're prepping it for sale. And one of the ones that kind of shows up for me mentally is the bimini top. That's important to make sure that that's clean and waterproofed, right?
Right. Well, in this sun-conscious era of suntan oil and everyone worrying about skin cancer, the bimini top is a critical element.
Yeah.
A key selling point, actually.
Yes.
Because to buy or put one on is not inexpensive.
Right. So you want to spruce that up, and then oftentimes off the bimini or a Dodger, there'll be curtains, usually those clear curtains, and oftentimes those can go bad over the years, getting opaque rather than clear. So you want to either try to clean up those curtains or get them off the boat, right?
Right.
Yeah.
The side mirror windows, if they're plexiglass, you want a plexiglass cleaner that will take some of that fog
Yes.
away.
Make them clear, right?
Exactly.
Now we're here, I'm standing in the engine compartment, and this is a key part for people, whether they're looking at a sailboat or powerboat, particularly a powerboat. They're looking at this engine compartment, drawing some conclusions, right?
Right. Well, this is the crown jewel of the whole operation. You're buying a powerboat, so the engine is the most important element to that word power.
Right. So they want to see something that's clean, so you probably want to degrease your engine to
Right.
start with, make sure everything's clean. They want to make sure there's no rust spots, right? So we've got this treatment here that you just pour on and brush on, and that arrests the rust, and then you can paint over it, right?
And then you want to be looking at things like you know, the wear on the fan belts, the clamps on the hoses, the condition of the hoses,
Yeah.
what kind of things are floating around in the bilge, is there any oil or not,
Right.
and things, you know, clues as to the condition and wearability of the motor.
Yeah, tighten that up. And probably a good idea to change the oil, right?
Yes, that would be, yes, that
Change
would
the
be
oil
important.
and charge the batteries. Maybe make sure everything's up to snuff in here, right?
Right, so when you turn on the key, everything does what it's supposed to.
Exactly. Well, Edward, you know, once you prep the boat, you're gonna clean it and detail it from stem to stern. You got to come up with a good price. And it seems like, in parallel to like real estate, that you want to get good comps, right? Good comparisons. Really, as close as you can to the manufacturer, the size, the model, apples to apples, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. So that's going to really help you hone in. Now, there's some different tools you can use to get these comps. One of them would be the local or regional newspapers. You know, when I was growing up, a local publication like the Gloucester Times here, they'd have a big page of boats. I think it's still a good idea, but there's really not so many boats here anymore. It's only
Right.
3 I saw. So local. How about soundings? That can be a good place to look. That's more regional or national, right?
Soundings is a great reference point as well as an educational tool.
Yes.
But a lot of what people do these days is go online, because you've got places like Yacht World and Boat Trader.
Yeah.
And you can assemble, within an hour, you can assemble just a vast store of reference points to, well, here's the boat I have. How does it compare with what's my competition like?
Right. And you can even use, and there's a variety of sites, right? So you got Craigslist, you got eBay, you got Yacht World, Boat Trader, Boats.com, a variety of them. They give you a different selection of boats. Another thing I'm thinking of is the guides. So when I was growing up, we used to look at the Blue Book, NAD, Blue Book, the Buck Manual. There's one called ABOS, and they can be a good tool too. I actually did a little research, and I put in, I just picked a boat that I picked off Craigslist. It was a 86 Mako 20 foot with 135 horsepower. And so I Googled that along with NADA book. So I get to the book, and I don't know if they have the books anymore, but they got a very simple site. And so first I put in the year and I put in the model. And then the second thing is you put in your zip code. Now that's important, right?
Right.
Because a boat in Florida is probably out in the sun 12 months a year, where a boat in Maine is probably out in the sun 2 months a year, right?
Right, exactly.
So that's going to make a difference in the value. And then the next page on the NADA site says, do you have any options? Canvas, electronics, entertainment, fishing, all that sort of stuff. So you check or don't check. And it says you can get a base value. You got to add 2 other things to the boat. You got the boat, and then you've got the engine. So for the engine, I entered a 2003 135 horsepower. And I didn't put a trailer, but normally you'd include that if you have a trailer. And then this site cranks out what they feel is the value for that boat. So they said low retail was about $6,000 for an older 20-foot Mako with a 135 on it, and average retail is about $6,500. So, as you were mentioning, a lot of people go to the sites now, and I want to talk more about that, but the NADA is still used by the banks to judge value for the loans. So it's still a good tool, I think, don't you?
Well, it is, and I think in the older model boats, the saving grace to keep the values up is the fact you've got a newer model engine on it.
Yes.
These engines have gone through such a tremendous change,
Evolution, right?
evolution in
Yep.
the last 20 years.
Yep.
You've gone from 2-stroke with oil and gas being spewed everywhere to these very clean, very quiet 4-stroke, and they're in all shapes and sizes, and they are expensive. So if you can find a used boat with a newer used motor, you're way ahead of the game.
Right. So if you're a seller and you have that, that's a good thing to have. So,
Right. And
so
that's-
the NADA is a good tool along with the Buck and the ABOS. And as you mentioned just a second ago, the websites, right? Years ago, we
Right.
didn't have much in the way of websites. And now at Craigslist, I went to Craigslist and I put in the Mako and I looked for the 20-footer and I found 3. They varied in price from $16,000 to $6,500. and with different engines and that sort of thing. So that's a good tool for a boat like that. And then I tried some of the other sites. I tried Boat Trader. I only found one 19-foot. I didn't find a 20-foot. I looked at Yacht World, and I didn't see anything on there, because that's really designed for larger boats and primarily involving brokers, right?
Exactly. Those are your more high-end boats.
Yeah. Yep. So that's a good tool if you get the boat that fits there. Not so good if you got a smaller boat. And again, I look at boats.com. They didn't have much there, but they could. It would be right in their target, a 20-foot.
Well, you could even
Mako.
Google it as center consoles and see what you come up with.
Exactly. Exactly.
Or runabouts, because they all have a different term.
Yeah. How about a local broker or dealer that's got a boat like yours? That'd be a good place to check in and see what they have and if it's moving or not, and what advice they have, right?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, the thing about every boat is basically the idea is the dealers are going to have theirs to sell at their pricing.
Mm-hmm.
You want to just make sure you've got a hull that's structurally intact and a motor that fully functions to its design limits. And with those two elements, that's 90% of what people are looking for in their purchase market.
Right. So when you're doing your comps, you want to look at these sources and try to compare, again, like to like.
Right.
And I think a good idea is to take this information and put it in a folder, kind of like I've done here in a crude sense, because that way when someone comes to talk to you about the boat, you can say, this is how I arrived at the price, right? You can be on a stable platform in terms of how you arrived at the price. Couple other factors, I think. One is professional appraisal. You brought it up earlier when you're assessing your boat. You can do it yourself or do it with a professional. That can be a good idea to help set the price, right?
It can be a good idea. It's a question of getting someone to kind of commit to giving you a number, and what are you going to have to pay them to get that number?
Right. So a bigger boat, that probably makes sense. A smaller
Right.
boat, not so much. Yep. And another thing that strikes me when you're setting the prices, let's say it's September, October, and you're going to put the boat away shortly. You've got, say, storage costs. You've got winterization costs, and you've got storage costs. So it might make sense, if you're looking at a $5,000 storage bill, it might make sense to lower your price $3,000 or $4,000, and you're still money ahead by not having to pay all the ongoing costs of keeping the boat, right?
Right. Well, you've got, in the fall, it's always a buyer's market. In the spring, it's much more of a seller's market.
Yes, yes.
So those are the two things that influence the pricing also.
Right, right. And so again, keep your eye on what the cost could be until you sell the boat, and then factor that in, right?
Right.
Yep, yep. And the final thing I think we might want to bring out is that along those same lines is sometimes you might want to look at the other boats in your model range, condition range, and if you really want to move the boat, drop the price like 5% below the other comparable, right? Because again, it'll flip that boat that much faster, and it might be the best course of action for you.
Yeah.
Yep. Edward, once you've found, you prepped the boat, you've done some competitive or comprehensive pricing to see what price range it should be in, you got to figure out where to advertise it, right? And
Yeah.
so there's a lot of different sources, as we talked about just a little earlier. And really, the source is dictated to a certain extent by the boat. So if you got a 13-foot whaler with a 20 horsepower on it, you might put it out in your front lawn and put a for sale sign on it. Whereas if you got like say a 28-foot regulator with a couple 250s on it,
Yeah.
you're going to need to go to one of these more robust sites, right? So let's say we've got the Mako, and we want to put it on one of these sites like Boat Trader, Yacht World, or whatever it might be. Where do photographs fit in? I know photographs fit into the picture here, and they're important, but can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, photographs are actually your best-selling tool other than the copy. Because with a photograph, you can say, just as they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words.
Right.
So basically, you know, in these
The smartphones.
smartphones that we have today, you have a tremendous tool.
Yes.
And they do a great job of compensating for your lack of photo skills.
Okay, all right.
But the thing that you want to remember about photography and pictures is, first of all, you don't want to photograph under a shady tree.
Yeah.
A bright sunny day throws a lot more shadows than a nice overcast with much softer light. That way you can sort of show more. So
Yes.
you want to
Yeah.
pick your time to photograph in a way that will complement the boat.
Okay.
And you don't need 100 pictures of the dashboard. You need kind of one of port, starboard, bow, stern, engine compartment, all the key elements that make the boat what it is.
Yes, good point.
And,
Point down any special features.
You
right?
don't have to have 50 pictures.
Right.
20 well-placed ones will do the job and tell the story.
That's enough, and you might want to check with the site to see what their size and any other format restrictions are before you start snapping away, right?
Well, my suggestion always is to make them smaller, because you're not going to a large screen, you're going onto a computer or a smartphone, so you really don't need a big scale image.
So typically this will do
Unless
the
you
job.
want to frame it on your wall and have a big picture at the end.
For this application, the smaller ones. Okay. Now, how about we get these quality photos, really highlighting the sales aspects of the boat. Mm-hmm. Then you got to do the copy, right? And I think a lot of people make a mistake there in terms of, oftentimes they don't seem to get specific enough, or there's some different things they leave out. What are your thoughts there?
Well, yes. I mean, you need some specifics. You've got the boat specifications, but then maybe you want to be sure they know if you can give them hours on the engine or the year of the engine.
Yeah, don't just say low hours, say 400 hours, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And be specific about how you used it.
Yeah.
You know, casual weekends.
Yes.
Or I motor out to Nantucket for a week at a time and just pedal to the metal all the time.
Yeah, all right, do a lot of fishing and bring up notable things like freshwater versus saltwater use, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
And any special features too, like it's got an extra engine package, or it's got a deluxe feature package, or something like that.
Or you've replaced a starter motor or rebuilt something recently. So
be specific, right? If you've got electronics, say that's a Raytheon model XYZ, just don't say it's got radar, right?
Yes.
Yep, yeah, okay. So a couple of good photos with a good description, and that's a good start, right?
Right, and you've got to learn how to do all of that in a minimalist way, because you've got minimal copy room in all of these online sites.
Right, right. Yep. So be succinct. Edward, once you've done assessing the boat, prepping the boat, fixing the stuff that needs to be done, getting a price, that sort of thing, now the ideal is people come to see the boat, right? You advertise it and they come to see the boat. They say, oh, I think I'd like to take a ride. And that's really something you do want them to do, right?
Yes, a demo ride is always good, especially if they are showing strong interest.
Yes, because that will help sell them, right? Because we talked earlier that this is an emotional decision, and so we want to get them to get a chance to get emotionally involved. Now, another thing I thought about is when they come to see the boat, it's really great to have an information kit. So I dug into the archives here, and if I were selling this boat, which I'm not, I'd show them the original ad that I responded to when I bought the boat 25 years ago. I'd show them the survey that was done. I'd show them the maintenance records that go back to when the boat was in St. Louis, Missouri. And just, this is the original owner's manual, and this is a manual for the engine. So I think that to have that stuff pulled together when someone arrives really helps them, again, amp up the emotional involvement and level, and gives a better chance of making a deal, right?
It does, and it also shows that over the time you've owned the boat, you've done all these things. You've got a paper trail, and everyone knows you're totally invested in this boat.
Right. Now, if we're going to show the boat, we probably want some sincere reflection of interest, right? Could be a written contract with a contingency based on the sea trial. That might be something. Another thing would be probably limiting the fuel, the water, and the number of people on board to get the best performance of the boat, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So those would be two things to make sure you do to have a successful boat ride, right?
Yes, well, you do want to show off the best side of the boat, and not having 10 people on board will definitely minimize that problem.
Well, Edward, we've really been talking about a methodical process here, and so hopefully after the sea trial it's led up to a satisfied prospect. They're interested in the boat, and so you want to help them ease the transition. One thing I can think of is to put together a folder of information that's relevant to the boat, to make it easier. You appear organized, builds confidence in them. How about the bottom line or negotiations? Any thoughts in that area?
Well, you want to have an idea of what you need to get out of the sale in terms of price. Do you have to pay off a loan?
Yeah.
Do you have, any outstanding obligations, or is it how much money do you want to make on this project?
Okay, so you keep that in mind when you get involved in the final negotiations.
Right.
And again, with some luck and maybe following some of the tips we've shared here today, they'll get to that point. Now, in Massachusetts in particular, paperwork is always something people got to keep in mind, and you've got some pieces there that are important, right?
Yes, the state mass.gov has things like a bill of sale form,
Right, what's that show on it?
which shows
Parties, right?
the parties' interest, the buyer, the seller,
Yeah.
the sale price.
It's very simple, actually.
It is.
Yeah.
The vehicle, the vessel description.
Yeah, so you get that right up
And then you have
Mass.gov.
a title document, which most boats above 16 feet need to have
Yeah,
a title, just like a car title. And that title transfers to the buyer, because the buyer needs to bring that in when he goes to re-register the boat under his name.
so the seller needs to have that squared away, have a clean title in the folder, ready to go, right?
Right.
Right, so you get the bill of sale, clean title. Oftentimes they use what they call a hull identification number to register a boat.
Right.
So that recorded someplace. And then sometimes there's other documents, depending upon the local authorities, there's different nuances in
Right.
terms of whether you got to get it notarized or different pieces of paper, right?
Yes, well, the thing that you got to remember also is the state is interested in its sales tax cut.
That's true. That's
So
true. Yeah.
they will look at your sale number, and then they'll go check it against their own documents.
Yep.
So if you put down $5
Yeah.
and you've just sold it for $10,000, they're not going to buy that.
Yeah, good point. Good point. Well, we're talking about money, and in my mind, cash is king. So if I can get cash, if it's appropriate for the value of the boat, I'd like to receive that cash at the bank, quite frankly, because now they can check it and make sure that cash is not counterfeit. That's good cash. Now, you typically don't want to go near a personal check. How about certified checks or wire transfers?
Well, the wire transfers are probably more preferred because in today's scamming world, certified checks can be reproduced to look like a real certified check, even if they are not.
Right. Right.
So unless you can take that piece of paper they just gave you and you both walk to the bank and the bank then cashes it,
Yes.
then you're good. But if they say this isn't Podek Bank doesn't exist,
Right.
then well, you wasted a lot of time.
Right. So cash or wire transfer are probably your best approaches.
Right.
Well, Edward, it's hard to believe, but we're out of time. I mean, we had a big subject here today, and I think we homed in on the important details, from assessing the condition of the boat to prepping it, to showing it, and closing the sale. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we close out the show today?
Well, I want to thank you for having me on the show, and I do appreciate the steps that you have pointed out in the selling process, because actually I'm in the process of selling a boat right now.
Right.
So I'm sort of looking at the buy and the sell, but yes, all of these things are important, what we brought out, and I enjoyed being reminded of them.
Good. Well, thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you, Smart Boating viewers, for joining us today. If you have comments or questions, maybe input, please join us at www.smartboatingus.com. Thank you.